of a 2-year-old boy thought their son was going to die, and they had good reason to think that. The doctors said that. But thanks to a groundbreaking surgery by a phenomenal surgeon, he is alive today. The toddler, Oliver Staub, was riding in a minivan with his family on vacation in Mexico. Suddenly, an armored truck plowed into their minivan. Oliver's injuries were traumatic. The 2-year-old's head was separated from his spine and from his spinal cord. His parents were told he would not survive the week. Then Oliver showed tiny, tiny signs of recovery. It inspired his parents to find a treatment. That is when they found Dr. Mohammed Biden at the University of Chicago. But how would the parents get the boy safely in his condition from Mexico to Chicago? It's going to be very expensive. A charity created by German soccer player Tony Cruz jumped in to help. The charity said it would cover the cost of travel to Chicago. When 2-year-old Oliver arrived at the University of Chicago, it was, of course, very, very risky. Dr. Mohammed Biden performed the surgery. By the way, Dr. Biden, he performed back surgery on me in August. I spoke to him a short time ago about the surgery he did on Oliver. Doctor, nice to see you.
Great to see you, Greta. Great to talk to you again.
Okay. Tell me about this boy who you operated on.
So Oliver Staub is a young 2-year-old boy from Germany. His father's from Germany. They were vacationing, he and his family, in Mexico when a very devastating car accident hurt the entire family minimally, with the exception of Oliver, who was really maximally injured. It was thought that Oliver was, in fact, dead on the scene. He probably didn't breathe for up to 20 minutes. People think, and so there's a lot of questions around the paramedic record at that time, but the family thought that he was dead in that moment. And the paramedics came right away. They did, as soon as they got there, the paramedics did very quickly put a breathing tube in for Oliver and take care of him and stabilize him. But he was thought to be dead. And when he went to the hospital, the physicians in Mexico told the family, he's dead. You should register him to be an organ donor. And indeed, the family signed him up to be an organ donor, but he didn't die. He started to open his eyes. So then they said, okay, we want everything done for Oliver. But the injuries that he had at that moment were really devastating. They were beyond what we consider to be injuries compatible with life. For example, he had what we call an atlanto-occipital dissociation, meaning dissociation between his head and his spine internally. He had a complete transection of his spinal cord, meaning it was cut in half. He had a complete break of his vertebral body and of his posterior elements. And so he had injuries.
Let me stop you there.
Yeah.
Let me stop you there. Does that mean his head wasn't connected to his body? Is that what that means?
Internally, yes. That's what that means.
So what was holding it on? Just the exterior part of his neck was holding it on?
The skin, the muscles, those are the elements that were holding everything together for Oliver. And then that's considered a highly unstable condition, as you can imagine. And so the physicians locally put him in a brace. And, his parents are the most loving, devoted parents. He's got twin siblings. They did every precaution to ensure that there was no movement, no deviation. But any little trigger, any little issue, and he was on a ventilator. He was sent home like that. And so any little issue could have resulted in his death.
How did you hear about him?
The parents went to centers and physicians all over North America and all over Europe, with them being from Germany. And so they sought centers from everywhere to seek help. I'm a leading neurosurgeon in this country, and I've done a lot of work around spine and spinal cord injury. And so they sought me out, and they said, everybody, what can you do? Everybody has said no to us. The doctors here think he's just going to die. And I said, this is a highly unstable condition. I don't know that what we're going to do surgically is going to help him. But we can try, because your alternative is to remain in this current condition, which is just so terrible. And so as I saw it, I couldn't believe that he was alive 3 months after his injury that he was still alive, and that they were keeping him going in that state. And they medical transported him then from Mexico to. They sold their home in Germany. They medical transported him to the University of Chicago. And when we first saw him and first began to prepare for surgery, the brace hadn't been removed in 3 months. He had abrasions and lesions just coming from. And so he was in very, very dire straits when he came to us.
How long was the surgery?
Multiple surgeries over multiple days, each of which extended, all day, over many hours. And so this was a really significant feat requiring large teams of surgeons. We have Comer Children's Hospital at the University of Chicago. And so surgeons from there, neurosurgeons, other types of plastic surgeons, ENT surgeons, many anesthesiologists, critical care medicine, pediatric doctors. And so really a whole team came together to deliver multiple surgeries for Oliver, the goals of which were twofold. One, to stabilize his head to his neck, both in the back and in the front. And two, to recreate the lining of his spinal cord and to put the spinal cord back in its proper anatomical position, reapproximate it, and recreate the lining of the spinal cord. And those were the goals of these very complex surgeries that we did. And these are a lot. These surgeries are a lot for an adult to take, much less a 2-year-old. And it was, yeah.
What did you connect it with? I mean, how did you connect his? I mean, I hate to be so graphic, but his head to his spine. How do you connect all this stuff?
So we use screws and rods, and then we also use synthetic lining in order to recreate the lining of the spinal cord. And so we utilized all of those levers. We utilized artificial bone. We utilized cadaveric bone. We utilized all of those levers to be able to reconnect and repurpose, Oliver's craniocervical junction.
But as a first. I mean, like you'd never done anything like this before. I take anything this catastrophic.
No, and someone there's no reports in our literature of this happening 3 months after injury. The idea that you'd even survive for 3 months like this, and then for this to be done 3 months later, and then, as we'll discuss, to see improvement beyond that. There's nothing like this.
What's his future?
So after we reconnected everything, first, these surgeries are a lot to get through. And surgery in a 2-year-old has the complexities of being surgery in a 2-year-old. And so, the first week after surgery, there were harrowing days. There were days where we thought his heart stopped and we restarted the heart. There were days where those were very dark and difficult days of getting Oliver through that postoperative recovery after multiple difficult surgeries. And then after that, strange things began to happen. One day he moved his hand, and everybody said, oh, it's a reflex. That's not real. And the parents kept telling us, no, this is real. And sure enough, then he started to move that hand to command. He started to move the hand intentionally. He started to move the other hand. One day his father told him he's going to go back to the hotel, and Oliver got mad at his dad, and he pushed his father away, which all of us were celebrating, but Oliver was mad in that moment, of course. And then he started to move his foot, and then he started to move the other foot. He started to breathe over the vent. He started to sense when he needed to urinate. He told his mom, I need to pee. And she said, go ahead. And he said, okay. He controlled when he was going to urinate. Someone who hadn't done any of this in 3 months, and who had catheters and ventilators. And so a lot of these neurologic functions that had been totally gone, never to return, suddenly began to return. And the nurses loved taking care of you and loved seeing you, and you were absolutely wonderful, as was Oliver too, obviously. And I will note the allied health and the nursing team that came around Oliver, the whole medical team, shift change. Even if someone was leaving at 3 a.m., they would say, I got to go and say goodnight to Oliver. And they would walk in, they would say goodbye to Oliver, and they would leave. So the whole hospital really rallied around him.
Well, no wonder the University of Chicago stole you from the Mayo Clinic. Doctor, thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you in a month for a checkup. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Talk to you later.